Welcome back for the second example of recursion. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over the factor this recursive statement method that I made. Here's a very simple method, but as you recall last time, this one here was just waiting for a simple returned number. And once it received a return number, it finished its code. Some of them had to start right here. Some of them, if it was 0, started or went way down here because that was kind of the last thing was it was a 0, so it actually printed out this and then returned a 0, which started a whole cascade of other returns and ultimately returned a 3 back to the main code. This is kind of the same thing. I mean, they all work the same way, but this one is a little bit different in that this one, the if statement, is what's going to trigger our final return. And what's going to build up, though, is right down here. It's going to build up a return in plus another factor this. So we're going to take a look and see if we can figure out how this works. So I've got the code right here. I was kind of working on it. I'm not actually sure that all these numbers are correct, but I'm going to send in a factor this, number 4. So I send in a 4, and I'm going to say the compiler is going to do this. It says, system out right before the if statement n is equal to 4. Since that one is false, it skips that, and it says system out.println returns a 4, but before that it says factor this 3. Well, this can't return a 4 yet because it has to do this first. It doesn't know what this value is yet, so it's going to start up this instance on the next page. So it's got to start up a factor 3 and wait to get an answer back for this one. Then once it gets an answer back for this one, it's going to multiply by 4, then ultimately send it back up to the top there. So it starts off another one of 3. It says factor this 3. This is right before the if statement. It prints out the number 3. This is false, so it comes down here. It says returns the number 3 times a factor this of 3 minus 1, which is 2. All right, so it doesn't return a 3 yet because it's waiting on this factor this. So this factor this, though, calls up another instance of this program, and it calls up a factor this 2. This is a number 2 here. And it says right before the if statement n is equal to 2, so this is false. And it says system out println returns a 2 times a factor this of 1, right? So we haven't done it. This doesn't get fired yet, but I think we're getting close here. So it's going to return a 2 times that. Factor this of 1 comes down here. It says right before the if statement n is equal to 1. It says, okay, now if n is equal to 1, return a 1. So it doesn't get down here. It doesn't get down to this spot. It returns a 1 and ignores this part now. Because once it, remember in Miss Dovey's videos, once it hits a return statement, it exits out and this part stops. So that's important to know, that this is the base case. This is the catch-all. This is how that whole cascade starts over here. So it returns a 1. So you come back in here. Now it returns a 1 right here. And what gets returned is not a 2 necessarily. It's a 2 times a 1. Because that's what got returned here. This was returned a 1. So it returns a 2 times a 1. So it returns basically a 2, but it's 2 times 1. It's kind of important to know. So it returns a 2 here, but it doesn't. This fires off this return statement, but it doesn't return a 3, does it? It returns a 3 times a 2. So 3 times a 2 gets returned back here, and it returns a 6. Now it doesn't return a 6 up here, and it doesn't return a 4 up here. It returns a 4 times a 6. So it ends up returning a 24. So if I did everything correct, and if I run it, I should end up with this is what is returned. It says a value of 24. So it's kind of hard to trace when you have a return value and you have another factor this instance here right after it. But I think that if you do it like this, if you really get stuck on something, you really don't understand how it's working, I would encourage you to print it out like this. And I just stapled them together right here. And then I just write down the numbers. And remember that you kind of have to think like the computer and put in the numbers everywhere it asks for the numbers. Remember, this sent out a factor this of 3, but the return statement sent back a 6. So sometimes you have to put two values in here. Just like this, it sent out a value of 4, but the return was a number 24, just like it is here. It really helps to make these little flip charts. I would encourage you to even copy this program that I have here. Just copy this into Dr. Java and see if you can run it, and then change some of these values and see exactly how it works. And you can also put in some more print statements and see how what gets run and when it gets run. And you might want to put a print statement right before the return 1 and see when does this fire off. You can put in some test print statements right there, so then it becomes real clear. And that's basically what I've been doing here, is that I just put in these print statements so I can see exactly what Java is thinking when it's going through there, and how does it come up with 24. So this is a factorial recursive statement, and there's other ways to make factorial. I mean, obviously, I think if I was going to do factorial, I wouldn't do it with a recursion statement, but I use recursion for other things, though. So, well, I hope this helps. Give this a try, and try it on your own and see if you can get it to do other things. See if you can get it to add, and see if you can get it to divide or whatever, something else other than multiplication. See if you can get it to do by twos, things like that. All right, well, good luck.